I am ready to welcome you, Akash. So welcome.
Thank you.
So yet another wisdom jam, and I welcome all those who are listening in. Also, wisdom jams are our attempts to jam with people who are practitioners of culture, understand deeper insights, understand nuances of something as amorphous as culture. And today I'm with someone who actually one of those leaders who I found using cultural language. Akash, I think the original spark for this jam was I don't remember where I was listening to you or where we were speaking, and you were talking about rituals, and you were it just sounded a very culturally astute and literate person talking about it, and it was really refreshing and nice. And I'm like, we have to have you. And Just a short introduction. Also, Akash is well known across the sector. Broadly speaking, it's been 20 years. Founder CEO of Quest Alliance, which is a very well regarded organization. 21st century skills through use of tech. Uh, you're also an Ashoka Fellow, an Asia 21 Fellow, on board of CMCA. So really like leading not only your own organization, but I guess also at an ecosystem level. So happy to have you on the other side.
Thank you. It's been, a thought that for a while that, to how does one reflect more often and share experiences. So it was, a pleasure to receive the invitation and be part of this conversation. So thank you for having me.
Good. So just wondering, Akash, where to begin, and what's coming for me is just to ease a bit into this conversation. Before this, we were talking that it's been quite a day for you in terms of back-to-back things, and I was curious. So, what was coming to me was life as a leader and an ecosystem person would be very hectic, would be packed, and you move across so many contexts also, as you were sharing. And and I was just curious, as you move from one context to the other, you're literally moving into across different cultures, and I'm guessing you're also carrying the torch of your own organizational culture, your own way of being. uh, when somebody sees you, I'm guessing they would say, "Acha, Quest Alliance ke log is tarah hota hai." It's very normal to look at the CEO and say, "Acha, this is where it is. This is spotlight." So curious, how does that show up for you? Is that a feeling of always being under a spotlight? Is that a natural way of carrying yourself? How does the interplay between your ways and all these contexts, the government context, the other orgs, how does that play out? So just curious to get started on what is Akash's subjective experience of leading and walking across contexts.
Yeah, I mean, that's not exactly an easing in question.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I guess. I think, just having a certain comfort with who you are, what you are, wherever you go, you are who you are. You're not trying to be someone else. At least I'm not sort of actively trying to be someone else or trying to take that additional responsibility that I have to appear to be very much like someone who comes across as very intelligent or very insightful. It's just being in the moment is where I draw energy from. At the same time, it's been a while that you accept yourself for who you are, right? You are trying to be, as a young person, when I think I was 24, 25, again, you try to be, when you're young, you can get away with some, uh, uh, you know, mistakes you make in trying to be very serious. Don't take yourself too seriously. Don't try to have all the answers all the time and be someone who can, has to appear like what the sort of conditioning of what a leader should be like. You can just be comfortable in the skin that you have and just show up as you are. I mean, sometimes
Mhm.
that may not be very pleasing to others as well if you are not paying attention to your external self as well. And that's just something I think over time, just showing up how you feel every day is probably how I approach it.
Hmm.
But that's coming from a deep sense of maybe security and a certain sense of conviction that you don't have to prove anything to anyone. You are just who you are, and it's okay for you to not take yourself too seriously and come across as someone who will be very forceful or very insightful all the time. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think that's generally
Nice.
how I would show up. So if I'm grumpy, I'm grumpy. If I am happy, I'm happy, and I'm not trying to be someone else who I'm not in that moment. That's generally my approach to showing
Nice.
up in spaces.
It also sounds like a journey to me because I'm sure to show up with full authenticity or with largely being authentic and being okay with how you are uh, must be a journey in the sense when I contrast this with my own experience, I've found that the gaze of people has affected me. Like the expectant gaze of people around me saying, what will Abhishek do or what will Abhishek say? And I wonder when it blurs and that becomes the primary kind of way of being. How much does the gaze influence me? And and over time, of course, it becomes one. Over time, people expect me to be a certain way, and I end up being a certain way. Uh, and then I've seen that in contexts where I'm not known. Normally, there's a bubble in which we move, but when I move to a party where I'm not known, a very different way of being comes forth. I feel a lot of freedom of a certain type, and I've wondered in the past, what does the gaze of people do? And I think what I'm hearing you say is that you've been able to reach up, and you can let me know if I'm hearing you right, that you've been able to reach a place where you're able to show up as is in the moment. And happy is happy, grumpy is grumpy. In the moment, there's deep security, deep comfort. Is that right to say?
I mean, I recently did some personality test which my uncle made me do, and sometimes some of these tests actually show up a side of you which you didn't think you are. So I may be
Hmm.
saying that all of this stuff that you show up as who you are, but like you said, sometimes does the gaze affect you in that moment as well? That that gaze of people and what it does to you. My way of kind of connecting with at least the gaze, if that's how you're sort of framing it, is really to open up, say, a deeper side of me. Say, if there are certain experiences or certain things that have deeply affected me, that have wounded me, or that I consider a wound, and am I able to open up the wound as a way to really put it out there? So I've taken sometimes a refuge in actually sharing something that is, say, deep and vulnerable to put out, and that just helps me open up, and then the gaze doesn't affect me as much. So my kind of defense almost to the gaze is
It's
to actually open up the wound and say, this is all that I am all about, and therefore it just helps me open up to the gaze a little more. I think that's been my realization, that I take refuge in that sometimes, or maybe it's not refuge, it's just helping me come into myself, in an open kind of space,
Hmm.
and stuff like that. So yeah, that's just a thought I've
Nice, nice. No, I mean, I totally hear you in terms of I guess I'm hearing the courage to be vulnerable and to share as a way of breaking up away from that gaze layer to an authentic layer. And yeah, I can reflect on my struggles with being vulnerable with the people around me, saying how will that be received? Will I be fully accepted? And I think over time, those small trade-offs also create a box in which I find myself stuck because I didn't break those boundaries when that moment came in. And I think now that negotiation happens where I kind of start to bring a little bit of myself because I'm like, oh, my closest people with whom I'm working, do they know me fully? And it's, I think that's quite a big victory, I guess, in a way, if you're able to do that at that moment. So yeah, so just I think just appreciating that. I think the long term effect of those small sharings, I think, to me seems like a greater freedom to be yourself and flow, with the present and be more authentic. I think that's how I'm
Yeah.
taking that, which is
And it's also therapeutic, actually. The more that you are sharing and the more you are being comfortable, it's also therapeutic. It's also cathartic to actually have that sort of experience multiple number of times to.
mm.
So yeah, I mean, it's just something that it wasn't a plan. It just happened, I
Yeah,
think,
yeah,
naturally.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, the end destination of that sounds like a nice, free, authentic space, broadly speaking, from where you can show up. Uh, but I want to take this to the organization, Akash. I think, I mean, hearing what you've shared, there's definitely admiration for what you've been able to choose as your way of being. And what I'm wondering is that how does that play up in Quest? As of course there must be that field of admiration. Does that become a field of imitation? Does that become a standard and a benchmark for people to say this is where I've to reach? Or has Quest been able to be a space where people are able to be authentic in their own ways? How does the your way of being or the standard of that show up in Quest?
Yeah, I think that's the kind of approach is that don't, at least for me, you don't want to, come in the way, right? I want to get out of the way of people to really get people to be who they are as well. So it's not like because I am doing what I am doing, I expect you to do what you need to do. I expect you to be who you are, and therefore not be so, you know, present in everyone's consciousness, and sort of step back to really create the space for more people to be who they are. And I think to a large extent, I feel if you have, say, a community of leaders, maybe 7, 8, 10 people as a critical mass, or even more. I mean, I don't think 10 is enough. It's like everyone having the opportunity to really be able to say who I am. Tell my story, be vulnerable, talk about my challenges. I think, and I'm not saying this because of because I am sort of leading the organization, but I genuinely feel that when more people can occupy the space or walk into the space with a certain amount of courage of being themselves, then it is visceral, that experience, that it's not like you have to imitate someone. It's not like you have to, you know, say things a certain way or be things a certain way, but you can truly feel like I can be who I am. So I think that's my sense. And again, I may be, like I said, may not be fully aware of all the things that are affecting people through my presence, but my belief is that people are comfortable being who they are most times at Quest. Maybe at least leaders who've been around for 5, 7 years are definitely reached that stage, is partly a hope, partly a belief. But I don't think there is a lot of sort of imitation, if
Mm.
that's the where you were sort of going with this. But yeah, that's
Yeah. I mean, to me, the authenticity perhaps that you bring in also fosters that authenticity or that comfort to be oneself without imitating. I think the authenticity gets imitated rather than the form. And I think to me, that is really the percolation of culture, right? The essence mood, not the form. And I think as I'm listening to you and also sharing, I'm also sort of, there is some kind of a blind spot for me to also look at what does that show up in Blue Ribbon or in Wisdom Tree, as this whole, how do I translate the essence rather than the form, so that there is, uh, and I don't know if it's an age thing that people substantially younger receive it differently, or is it my own kind of block of not being able to hold it in a deeply authentic way. But yeah, I think this is definitely something to think about. Saying why, what are times when the form percolates, and what are times when the essence is able to move around. And I think, to me, what you, or I think any culturally sensitive leader, is able to tap to the essence level and kind of broadcast the essence rather than the form. I think, is that fair to say that it's
Yeah, I mean, it is to a large extent. I think it's fair to say that the essence is more important, but oftentimes people tend to replicate the form as well till you realize that you're trying to go down a path. Like, for example, we had a leader in Bihar who was our who spent 5-7 years at Quest, and then he moved to Bihar, and a Bangalore kind of environment that is a lot more compassionate. Or so I'd like to believe. There are multiple things that go into the weather, the people, the general feel of the place, and then this person goes to Bihar and tries to recreate the same form
mm,
in a space that is perhaps much more volatile. It's much more aggressive. It's much more it's less nurturing as naturally the space, like a Samastipur district. And he's trying to he's trying to recreate the form, and he's failing. And
mm,
till we kind of have a conversation or multiple conversations to say it's not that you have to try to do the same thing, that artifacts that you're creating in Bangalore or in any other place, but it is to go deeper into bringing out the essence and the culture of Bihar or Samastipur, and that gets
mm,
much more beautiful than a Bangalore is, if you can really touch that space of people. And I think he was able to do it. It took much of heartache to say I am constantly comparing myself to the form, till I realized that it's not about the form. It's not about saying that are people playing table tennis in your balcony as the form, but are people really deeply engaging with the culture through different artifacts? Could be art, it could be other things that you can touch into. So yeah, I think I agree with that it is touching the essence rather than the form. But the realization that I might trying is my reference point of form overpowering, and I'm not able to touch the essence. That
mm, mm.
realization, I think, takes a while, and maybe different people see it differently, and people do try to recreate the form over the deeper meaning, I think. But staying with the struggle, I think, is another important dimension to.
Continuing to, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So to say that, yeah,
Yeah. I think it's an interesting example you shared about Bihar. So one of the things in Wisdom Tree we enjoy doing is working across organizations, because the learning kind of is quite phenomenal just in the contrast. And what we've seen is that each geography and each org also has its own roots. There's already raw material available to play around with, uh, that one can actually use as building blocks for what will work. I think, to me, leaders are always kind of asking what will work in this organization, what's the pulse here. And it's always, to us, a complex combination of the geography, the people, their backgrounds, multiple factors. And I think to me, also tapping into the roots of a particular place and then infusing the essence, which means for me, it would be that when I go to Bihar or when I come to Bangalore or Mumbai, there is a certain innate kind of culture already. It has its strengths, it has its approach, and so I think to me, tapping into that and then infusing that with essence to me seems to be kind of a recipe, I guess. And I'm saying this because, and let me make it more elaborate. I think let me explain. So, like that, if there is a Mumbai way of doing things, and if I have to bring more intentionality and slowness in the Mumbai way of doing things, then we say, okay, we'll start with a check-in because it's a non-negotiable in a pace like Mumbai to check in. But when I take a check-in process, say to Shivni, it's not that important because the pace at which you're starting already is actually a more intentional pace. But there, I may be able to start with a song, which is a local folk song, for example, which gets everybody going. And yeah, so to me, I think even the same essence may take different forms based on the cultural context of where we're attempting to play with it, right? Uh, and yeah, I think to me that interplay, I think, is uh, what I was pointing out. Because yeah, I think across organizations we've seen different things work. The same essence also being expressed in different forms. Uh, yeah, something of that sort. So curious if that's something that resonates. Has that been your experience? Because you're leading one organization, but you're also on the board of another, and I'm sure you interact with a lot of others, advising them. So just curious, is that a fair thing to say? The interplay of these variables.
Yeah, I think somewhere the core, like if you say, say you have sand or mud and you have water and you have a pit, and different people, based on where they are making different things in the pit. The sand and water and the basic ingredients are still intact in terms of
Hmm.
that sand, and it's not plastic or it's not something else. So the property of the sand and the property of when the sand and water meet are intact. What I make in the pit, based on where I am, how I relate to that context, may be different for different people based on what matters to them, and therefore you're not paying too much attention to what is actually being made,
Hmm.
but you're
Hmm.
paying more attention whether the property and the chemistry and the interaction of the mud and water are actually uh, there for people to make what they want to make. So what do you pay attention to as a leader, is where then you start sort of trying to sense make, saying, am I watching out too much for artifacts versus the property and the chemistry? I think that's what I would sort of put it, based on what you're.
That's very beautifully put. I think that's very very. I think that's a great metaphor, and it clarifies because yeah, I think that like you said, the raw materials and the chemistry rather than the forms that it takes. Uh, so yes, I'm curious. What is at Quest then? What how do you make those raw materials available for people to make their own kind of meaning making or showing up? And just curious, what are those raw materials? Is it time? Is it playfulness? Is it I don't know. So just curious about. I mean, I'm taking your metaphor, just borrowing that metaphor as a leader, what do you make available so that people may be able to infuse culture and express it in their own ways? And what I'm hearing you say therefore is that as a leader it's not about enforcing a certain form on everybody, but going a level deeper to give the raw materials so that people are able to infuse it. I think yeah. So
Yeah,
what would that at Quest be like for you?
I mean, it's multiple things. I think one is, I think, alignment between the individual, the organization, and the sector. So can you create that kind of a process where organizational goals inform, or the sector influences the organization influences the individual goal setting, or from a personal perspective, can personal vision also influence organizational mission, and the organization then impacts the sector? So while you can plan for, a very outside in approach to alignment, saying this is where the sector is going, this is where the organization is going, and this is where therefore the individual needs to go. Is there enough space for an inside out as well, that this is my vision and this is how it relates to the organizational mission and this is how it contributes to the sector, and not everything will be aligned, but at least look for a certain minimum level of alignment. So one is the process of, investing in alignment building. I think that's one ingredient, I would say, to have those properties, the materials that we spoke about. I think the second one is some common beliefs that we have, whether it's about looking at, how does your um strategy and vision mission actually translate into certain beliefs. So it's important that we see the big picture together as an as team members, and it's not like I am asked to see the big picture on my own. So collective sense making of the big picture through investing in getting people together to meaning make on the big picture, to see the process, what is our common understanding of what does it mean to be learner centered, and what do these processes look like, what does structure mean to me. Am I a shared belief that we are not a hierarchical organization, but there are different roles we play, and therefore some things do need hierarchy, but largely we are more interdisciplinary, collaborating across teams, and not saying that, hierarchy and role hierarchy should come in the way of deep collaboration and meaning making, or professional pathways. How do I have a shared belief that investing in each individual's professional pathway is how I believe that every individual should, thrive, should realize their potential, all of that. So there are some of these beliefs that are shared beliefs, and some practices or rituals that support these beliefs to be lived on a regular basis, whether it's daily, monthly, yearly. Different practices can help these beliefs come alive. So yeah, I mean, I would say that's been another key thing where we've been able to build a blueprint, which is not necessarily something that people have to remember, but they experience it. So that's another ingredient, I would say, alignment, having this kind of common belief system, blueprint that, and then how does this manifest, which is creation of artifacts and creation of, outputs that help you kind of have a memory, have a relationship with these beliefs together. So building artifacts collectively, whether it's weaving a quilt together that you can, bring back to your geographical location, or whether it's printing, say, a kind of an storytelling that people do about their personal journeys in larger platforms in front of 300 people. So I think so artifacts and shared creation of artifacts and experiences really is another one where people start feeling that it's okay to share vulnerability or authentic experiences in a way that you celebrate those diverse people and ways of working and stuff like that. So I would say those 3-4 ingredients are important, or at least are ways that Quest does. Food, I think, is a big one ingredient that also creates an everyday experience. So we do have kitchens in different offices, and so the food becomes one more catalyst for such.
Nice. Yeah. Food is always food is such a cultural. It's food itself has so much culture. I think I love what you've lined out. So collective sense making and kind of the big picture, if I hear that right, and then for what it means and what are our beliefs around it, and then what are the practices that allow us to live these beliefs. Which so I think that one part, and like you said, the whole alignment between me, the org, and the sector. Um, and I think for us also, what we are learning is that when there's the right alignment, this two-way alignment that you spoke about, then energy kind of seems to move. Like there's a sense of aliveness, there's a sense of resonance, a felt aliveness. And I would contrast it to two kind of extremes. So if the org is completely swept away by the sector, then there is that drift of saying, who are we then? क्योंकि हम तो मतलब जो जमाना है उसी के साथ चल रहे हैं. And if an org is too shut down and saying, oh, we are independent and it doesn't matter what the outside world is, we're going to shut our windows and, be ourselves, then that itself also creates a disconnect from the larger trends, I think. But when it's at the right balance, that I am adding something to the sector, but I'm not disconnected from the larger waves, then there's an org aliveness. And I think same at the individual, like you said, that if the individual is only being affected by the org, but is not able to affect it, that energetic charge doesn't happen. And I think for us, yeah, a lot of that aliveness and energy in an organization, the buzz, the evidence of a healthy culture for us is that buzz, right? That you can feel the energy of the org. So yeah, I think that's
I
what.
think another important aspect which I probably didn't touch upon is I think the space for dissent and for people to completely express dissent and for you to stay uncomfortable as leaders with dissent, because when you are trying to do things in a multicultural organization, there is a very high likelihood of dissatisfaction, and not everyone is singing the soul song of the organization, and you don't want to ask everyone to sing the same song just because there is a song to sing. So there is going to be dissent, and discomfort is going to be a big part as leaders to hold your discomfort and not try to come in and solve for dissent, because I think dissent is a powerful tool for people to express their dissatisfaction. And as a leader, sometimes your natural inclination is, let's go out and address this head on, and that's the sign of a powerful leader who can do it. And I have found, at least for me, it's not about stepping in when there is dissent. It is, or there have been instances, I wouldn't say that it's not about me, because there have been instances where you've to step in, but there have also been instances where you don't need to step in, and where let the dissent play out, let the collective intelligence of people also be used to respond to dissent. And that's also how you are building leaders who have greater of the muscle fabric of doing this stuff, right? So I think dissent and being able to express dissent by others, especially those who don't feel included, and you will always have people who will not always feel included, or not always, but oftentimes you will have that. So yeah, I think just the space for dissent, holding confusion, holding yourself from wanting to solve for it immediately, resisting that, comfort in discomfort. I think those are things which I feel is an important ingredient in that sort of environment of the materials or the chemistry, in a sense. Yeah.
I think, I mean, to me, this also in some ways seems to link back to where we started our conversation, in that in your capacity to be authentic and vulnerable, uh, you have resolved a lot of your own knots, and you're there and you're present. Like you said, you're fully present, because then you are able to perhaps resist the temptation to resolve. Like otherwise, I feel that if something's triggering outside and if I don't have the grounding, the tension, I'm not able to hold the tension that it is creating, it's creating inside me. And so I have to rush to resolve it, I think. And to me, being grounded is about then being able to hold the tension. I think what you shared is really, to me, not only about dissent, but about being able to hold the tension and let the collective own the tension, right? Something like that. I think there are leaders who internalize that tension and become stressed out and make it their own, whereas it should be in the commons. I think so. You're commoning the tension. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Yeah. With the trust that the collective will step in.
Yeah. Oftentimes, yeah, more often than not, the collective is more powerful than the individual, right? I guess so, so yeah, I mean, definitely having the belief that the collective will step in.
Yeah, yeah. I think for a lot of leaders, if I look at my experience of working with them, this act of stepping back uh, is such a difficult act. It shouldn't be, but I guess there are so many of these unconscious tugs and pulls of being the last person standing, or the ownership, over ownership. I mean, because that's how it's landing. Like, this is also my problem. That is, I'll solve every problem that shows up. And I think what I'm hearing from you is that instead of doing the over ownership, if I'm able to hold the tension, then others have the space to own it and resolve it, and the group intelligence kicks in, right?
Yeah, yeah. And they also greater sense of ownership and belonging happens because you are then in it solving as well.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's obviously harder to practice, and I'm not claiming that I can practice it all the time, but I think it's definitely worth uh, uh, it's definitely worth thinking about. Like, for example, I had a very close friend who I worked with for 20 years, Abhijit, who passed away 2 years back. He was the COO of the organization, and my response to his passing away was that there can never be another relationship like I had with Abhijit. But over time, I've realized that if you actually let go of that, what you're holding on to, saying, "Oh, we both had a certain relationship and a chemistry that was built over 20 years, and we arrived at that after 20 years." But it's not like I then suddenly close myself and say, "Now there can never be another Abhijit." But that's my immediate reaction, that there can never be another Abhijit, and therefore I need to be him too. And can I? And I tried to be him, and I still try to be him sometimes. But I've had a realization lately that there can be many more Abhijits if I really let go of this notion that there is only one Abhijit in my life, and therefore I can jam with many more people in the same way that I used to with him. If I let go of the idea that I am holding on to this one person who I grew up with as a 18-year-old, and in 20 years we did great stuff. And I can do the same with, can I recreate the same magic in many different combinations, because now I've had the experience of doing that with one person. I can actually take it to 10 more people in my own relationship. But for that, I need to let go of that notion that there is this one.
Yeah.
And kind of goes back to this point of, are you also the one who you're feeling that you're able to resolve everything, or let
There are, yeah.
yeah. So that's just something that was coming to me as you were
Oh,
talking.
beautiful, beautiful. Thanks for sharing that, because that gets me in touch with my own internal caste system, right? Caste system being that there are certain people of a certain caliber, and then there is another level and another level. And only those kind of people fit that caliber, and I'll treat them. And I think what you're perhaps able to do is not have that exclusive kind of bracket, but open it up for everybody. I think that's what I'm hearing. And the
Yeah,
other
I
thing that
don't claim that I have been able to do that fully. It's a realization I have had of late, and I'm working on it. So it's
yeah,
not something I
yeah,
claim that I have
yeah.
uh, been able to do.
Yeah. No, no. I can totally get that it's work in progress. I found it very nuanced. I think what you shared was there's nice nuance to that. The other thing that's standing out to me is also what gets called out as humility, but I wouldn't name it as humility versus, I think, just giving people their own space to be themselves and to shine. I've seen leaders who shine so bright that others kind of drown out in that brightness. And like Vinoba said, we need a night sky without the moon where every star can twinkle, and that lights it up. And I think there's something about the inner aspect of what you're perhaps being able to do that allows this to even manifest. And so it's off the conversation, but I'm still very curious on what are your inner practices. Is there coaching? Is there your self-reflection? How do you end up with these kind of refined perspectives? What's that process for you? Is it, yeah, curious about that if there is.
I don't know. I can say that there is one practice, but I think there's obviously this one side where, you're careless and just go, let everything out, drink, lots of beer, eat lots of good food, and, just live it up at one level. At another level, you're also trying to, at least I have been trying to spend more time with myself, whether it's a meditation or a walk or just enjoying a game that I play or cooking food. So I guess there is not, or I think lately going on solo treks or, solo travel recently, last 3 years, maybe not 3, 5 years, 3 to 5 years has been another thing which I've started enjoying more of. But yeah, I mean, it's not like there is one practice. I definitely am open to newer experiences of, like, solo travel happened, or some kind of human lab once in a while, or one I have done, or yeah, online courses. I was doing some cooking experiments with on putting videos online and stuff like that. So yeah, it's been varied. I don't think there's one. I mean, off late, I would say meditation is the one thing I would say I go to often. But yeah, I mean, I've actually not believed in being very disciplined in my life, and maybe that's the side of me which is trying to be against the tide, saying if everyone says be disciplined, I'm not going to be disciplined. I'm going to break the rules around being disciplined. So that's a little bit of a rebellious side, I would say, of not doing some things, and I'm getting to terms with it, that it's okay, like, to be disciplined as well once in a while, and stick to a practice, and invest in that, because you see the value when you do it repeatedly. So off late, I'm seeing merit in that, but my general being was being rebellious to sort of these ideas. But now I've, I think, been more accepting of discipline as a way to be and invest in that.
Nice. So ecology of practices, I guess, which you keep trying out is well. I was particularly curious because when I reflect, I've seen that what seems glaringly obvious to people around me, and what I even intellectually know, but to realize it, like at a level, and to live it is so hard, or it's been hard for me. I have to really, I've had to struggle with even something as basic as saying that collaborating with certain type of people, right? I know I'm not able to collaborate with certain type of people. My coaching sessions have said it, and I have reflected, but to reach an insight saying, okay, there is this reason, or this is what is going on. I think that's what, that's the part that I've found challenging. And I think what I'm hearing from you is that there are multiple things you anyways do. But my gut feel still is around authenticity as a superpower. I feel somehow there's something about the capacity to be vulnerable that you started out with, and I think in our conversation also, just to share so directly. Uh, yeah, I feel there's something there as well. So that's enriching. Uh, Curious from this conversation, what's getting evoked? Are any questions coming to you? Anything that you feel that you would like to steer this conversation? We're in our last kind of 10-15 minutes, but coming to culturally sensitive leaders, anything that you'd like to name or call out?
I think one realization I've had is that, like, in Indian cultural context, we are also playing multiple roles. Or, you're a child, you're a parent, you're a brother, sister, you're, bua, mama, many different roles that culturally you are. assigned to play almost in families, mostly because that's kind of your first organization that you come across as you grow up and discover the multiplicity of roles, but also relationship with power and so on plays out in the family first. And I feel that oftentimes this multiplicity of roles get very curtailed in organizations where you're asked to play one role, you have one job description, and you have to deliver on that job description, which is very, very specific. And that's where I feel people lose the plot in terms of being able to leverage the same person who can actually play multiple roles when it comes to the psychological space in an organization, or being able to be a problem solver, or being able to be helping with just organizing an event or something. I think we tend to compartmentalize people, and that's where they feel limited and restricted to being able to realize their full potential and being their whole selves. And if we can create multiple roles for people in organizations through creating the right practices, systems, processes, we can just help people be many cells and not one cell. And I think that's what you want. That's the sweet spot for individual feeling happier, feeling more that they belong, having sort of a sense of community, all of that. So I do feel there is something there in terms of multiplicity of roles and how we can think about that, as opposed to limiting your role to one job description. That's been one
Nice.
realization. And I think the other is that systems and processes are often looked at as very top down, and especially in growing organizations, systems and processes can also be like the sun that's actually giving energy to enabling many things in nature to thrive. But they are not built with that sensitivity and that energy giving force. They are times built for being more controlling, more bureaucratic, and having more the so-called transparency that people often times want at the cost of people feeling disempowered. And so our systems and processes like the sun that actually nurture and create the ecosystem, or are they rule based that oftentimes become about control? And I feel that's a realization that's important to hold as we think about what are the kind of practices, systems that we want to build.
This is interesting because, and this is great, of course, very very insightful, because the first thing you shared, which is bringing a lot of selves in, resonated, and that gave birth to a question saying, what about results and how do you drive for results? And it almost felt like what you spoke about systems being energy giving kind of solves the paradox of not having to be oneself and show up like an army which goes after results, but you're able to kind of build an ecology where perhaps there are different cells, and then there are systems which energize people, and almost like building a forest rather than an army is how it kind of landed on me. And so you said systems coming from from across or different parts of the organization. I'm curious about Quest, and in general, do you design systems consensus based, or is this something which comes up as ideas, and or is it best practices? How do systems which act like the sun and energize people, where are they born from?
So, so actually, we run this program called the Emerging Leaders Program, which is kind of an internal leadership program that we do with not just us, but our partners as well. And for example, each of the leaders identify something that bothers them about the current practice in the organization. And they come up with sort of change initiatives that they want to drive inside their organizations, or inside our organization, or in partner organizations. So for example, some of the examples I'll just read out of some of the change projects. Say Asha is talking about sustainability sourcing, where how do we source our stationery and our materials and our practices around sustainability. So her kind of change project is around sustainability, or someone is talking about a culture of data driven decision making and project management, that someone is bothered about making proper recognition as part of the system, someone is talking about. So a lot of so we have 20 such practices every year that or 20 such projects every year that come out of this kind of leadership program, where people are given the frameworks and mindsets to drive change, and then they are actually taking a change and taking it to the next stage. So one, it's crowdsourced. Some of these are crowdsourced, where they work on this and then present it to a group of 70, 80 people, and then based on the feedback they get, they decide whether it's a go, no go to actually do this. So definitely crowdsourcing some of these processes, practices is one place it comes from. I think the other place it comes from is that the leadership team has working groups where, based on our priorities, you are identifying 2 3 sort of areas that you want to improve your practices on, and then the same process of them ideating in working groups and presenting it to a group of 70 80 hackers is what we call sort of hack the future of the organization. The positioning is that you can drive change, and that's not 20 people or 10 people in leadership team, but in a, say, a 350 member organization, there are 70 80 people who are actively involved in kind of designing and co-designing these systems processes. So that's where I think they majorly come from. Now, obviously, to get to this stage, we've had to go through some ups and downs, but that's where the sourcing and stuff happens.
It almost sounds like it's a mix of crowdsourcing ideas, but somebody's also showcasing. So having done some work on it, it's put up to the hackers who then build on it and hack it to match current reality, so that kind of the future gets born. And I love this language of hacking the future, which is also, I think, giving a say. But the final say, if I'm hearing correctly, the final say of whether it's a go or a no go is to the group that is coming up with the idea, right? They've consulted everybody, but they're the ones who are going to decide to push for it or to drop the idea. And that's how it works out. That's fascinating to know. And also, what I heard from the examples you gave were they're very tangible and tied to a very ground reality, to a very real problem. And I think working with that rather than working generically with thriving culture and so on. So I think that also seemed like a reason to act, I guess, right? When there is a pressing kind of issue or a real desire, there is that impetus to act. When it comes to people owning this, I think again a practice like this makes people own, right? Like I guess you're also, from what I'm hearing in Quest, creating spaces where people can step in. The holding the tension piece that you spoke about, and giving the raw materials that you shared, and now this one where I can come and hack. Sounds like an empowered person, then I can bring many selves. And I think that's what it's creating for me, that if I'm in Quest, I can bring many selves to work, step in to resolve tensions, hack the future. Sounds like that kind of a place to work.
Yeah, but I think there's always the dark side also of things, right? It's not always that everyone experiencing things that way. There is an invitation to step in, but there may be relationships, dynamics with your supervisor or with your team leader that may not allow you to do it, and there is no mechanism right now we have to signal some of those discomfort. So it may not be fair to say that everyone experiences it in that way, and there are subcultures which are maybe not subcultures, but relationships that are stopping things to fully get experienced that way. So yeah, the building blocks are definitely those, but it's hard to say that everyone's gonna get that consistent experience. Obviously, some nuancing through culture surveys that you can double click into geographies or patterns with tenure or patterns with backgrounds and skills, caste, gender, all of those things, we've been able to now do some amount of that consistently, where you can get a pulse on culture from these various perspectives, whether it's gender, caste, geography, role, tenure, um, other variables that are going to shape the experience of people in the organization. And then you can start maybe doing planning and interventions that are much more directed towards
Correct.
those insights that you can generate, and see impact also of your inputs with that lens, that did you move something because you did that. Otherwise, people say you spend a lot of time and money and energy on this, but what's the impact? So
Mm.
yeah, that's something which I feel we are trying to figure how to do.
Very precision targeting then. But it really also sounds like culture is such a priority when you're able to do that level of nuanced thing. The only thing I would add to that in our experience is the conversation around power in organization seems to be missing, and a lot of the resistance comes from just not making power transparent and opening it up to saying this is what's playing out. And I think in orgs, especially in high-powered teams and where there are multiple hierarchies, we try to also kind of make that visible, that resistances are also these dynamics, power equations, and just how do we foster a culture where power is not like the hidden kind of elephant in the room but nobody's talking about, but it's kind of surfaced and there's some higher possibility for everybody involved. Everybody's interests are covered so that everybody signs up to play the next game, so nobody's feeling they're losing. And I think that's one experience for us as well.
Yeah.
So I we are almost on the time. So I'm going to ask you, Akash, if there are any totkas or talismans or thumb rules or axioms or principles or questions, a few of those that you want to leave people with for their organizations or. And I know I'm sorry for putting you suddenly in the spot, but that's what came to me saying. Would there be a few words, phrases, questions, anything that you'd like to leave us with as what we could hold on to?
I don't think I can give any specific wisdom to wisdom tree in that, but I would say sort of one realization is that we've been through some amount of separations, like, which are this sort of human nature separation, where we've felt so distant from nature uh, because of the capitalist kind of mindset of extractive industries and so on, but also sort of this disconnect with nature, or there is this left brain right brain separation, that you can either be very relational or you can be very logical, and you have this masculine feminine separation where you feel that you are one or the other, or there is this kind of inner separation and an outer separation, that you are sort of not fully sticking by your convictions and beliefs because you're constantly pleasing people outside. And some of these separations, I feel, are artificial, and the wholeness of life is about embracing both sides to yourself, because you've suppressed one for the other, or you've been conditioned to sort of say that this one is better than the other, and or one is more dominant than the other. Yeah, you could have these dominant cells of you, but there are these sides which make you whole, that make you human, and embracing those kind of binaries into a more whole way of being, I think, is a realization that the stress is caused because of the separations, and because there is political stress, there is environmental stress, there is well-being, and all of these individual stress also. So somewhere, if we are able to sort of bridge the gap between these separations and think ourselves as more whole humans, I think you just feel more, just feel better about things around you. And so yeah, that's just been, I don't know if that's a input, but that's just a realization that
Yeah. That's
that
I think that's a beautiful note on which to end also, which is not kind of separation but wholeness, and so much of it originates from that. So I think that was lovely. Akash, loved the conversation, loved the insights, loved your experiences. Thanks for sharing those with us.